8-year-old girl lost her voice after watching her parents die. Until a lonely miner made her speak, the frontier planet was called Ridge 7, but most people in the outer colonies simply called it red dust. From far away, it looked like a rust-colored marble spinning under a thin sky. Up close, it was a hard place to live, wind that never stopped, sand that got into every bolt and seam, and long distances between towns that felt like islands in an ocean of desert. A small caravan moved across the open flats, following old beacon lights that blinked on buried poles. The vehicles were boxy and tough, built like wagons with metal skin. Solar sails folded on their backs like wings. They rolled slowly because the ground was rough, and the wind fought them like an angry animal. Inside the lead crawler, a little girl sat between her mother and father. Her name was Myra. She was 8 years old, with dark hair tied back and dusty boots that were a little too big. She held a small toy, an old tin star that her father had found in a trader's box. He told her it was a sheriff's star from old Earth stories, and he said that meant it was a sign she would grow up brave. Myra's father, Jonas, drove with both hands tight on the steering handles. He was not a real cowboy, not like the songs, but on Ridge 7 the word cowboy meant anyone who could travel the empty lands and bring something back. He wore a wide hat with a cracked brim and a coat lined with heat fiber. He had a revolver on his belt, not because he wanted trouble, but because the frontier asked for it. Myra's mother, Lena, kept checking the back screen. Their trailer carried supplies, water filters, seed packs, spare power cells, and medicine. They were moving from one settlement to another, hoping to start again in a better place. Dust Haven was the destination, a mining town built around an old drilling field. "Almost there," Jonas said, trying to sound calm. Lena smiled at Myra. "When we reach town, you'll see lights at night again." Myra nodded. She liked the idea of lights. In the wild, nights were too big. The stars felt close, but the darkness felt closer. The caravan had 4 crawlers in total. 2 belonged to their family and friends. The other 2 were hired rigs with drivers who did not talk much. Everybody on the frontier knew not to ask too many questions. The wind rose, turning the horizon into a pale blur. The beacons blinked like slow heartbeats. Then something changed. The lead driver, Jonas, saw a flash in the distance. Not lightning, not sun glare. A short, sharp flicker that did not belong to the desert. He lifted his goggles. "Lena, you see that?" Before she could answer, the comms crackled with static. A voice tried to speak, but it broke into noise. The second crawler slowed behind them. Jonas eased off power. The caravan rolled to a cautious stop. Myra felt the pause like a held breath. "Stay inside," Lena told her softly. "Just for a moment." Myra hugged her tin star tighter. Jonas tapped the dashboard, trying to reset the comms. "Probably a storm pocket," he said, but his tone did not match his words. Outside, the wind hummed. The beacons blinked. The desert watched. Then the convoy's rear sensor chirped, one fast warning note that made Lena's face go pale. Jonas turned his head. His eyes narrowed. Movement. He couldn't see much through the dust, but his screen showed shapes approaching, not the wide, slow shapes of cargo beasts. Not the steady lines of traders. These were fast. Low vehicles skimmed the sand like dark fish underwater. Their engines were quiet, their bodies matte black, built to avoid detection. The hired drivers in the back crawlers sent a message: unknown riders, keep tight, riders. That was what people still called them, even if they rode machines instead of horses. Jonas moved quickly. He locked the cabin door. He activated the crawler's external lights to cut the dust. He set the trailer brakes so they would not be separated. Lena pulled Myra close. "Eyes on me," she whispered. Myra stared at her mother's face, trying to understand why her voice sounded like it did when someone tried not to show fear. The black skimmers circled. A dozen of them, maybe more. Their riders wore helmets with blank visors. They did not wave or speak. They moved like a pack that had done this many times. Jonas tried the comms again. "This is a civilian caravan," he said. "We're heading to Dust Haven. We have no trouble with you." No reply. One of the skimmers stopped close enough that Myra could see it through the front window. Its shape was sleek, too clean for the frontier. It looked expensive, like something owned by people who never worked under the sun. Jonas swallowed. "Lena, back hatch, if anything happens." "Don't," Lena said. "Don't say it." Myra felt her mother's arms tighten around her. A loud pulse hit the caravan, not an explosion, not fire. It was a burst of energy that made screens flicker and lights dim. The crawler shuddered. The air inside smelled sharp like heated metal. The power dipped. The comms died completely. Jonas slammed his palm on the panel. They disabled us. The hired drivers tried to accelerate, but their rigs stalled. The convoy was trapped in silence. One of the riders lifted a device that looked like a short staff. It flashed and the lead crawler's door lock clicked, then blinked red. Jonas's eyes widened. They're overriding. Lena moved fast. She pushed Myra down toward the floor between seats behind the storage bin. Stay low, she said. No sound. Myra obeyed. The floor was cold. Dust tickled her nose. She kept her toy star pressed to her chest like it could protect her. The door opened with a hiss. Two riders climbed into the cabin, boots heavy, movements steady. They did not run. They did not shout. That calm was worse than anger. It meant they felt no need to hurry. Jonas stood up slowly, hands visible. Take supplies, he said. We don't want to fight. One rider scanned the cabin with a handheld light. The other looked at Lena, then at the trailer map display. Neither spoke. Jonas tried again. Please. There's a child here. At that, the rider paused. Myra's heart slammed. She wanted to breathe, but her chest felt locked. The rider stepped forward. Jonas blocked him gently with an open palm. Don't, Jonas said. Just take what you want and go. A quiet struggle followed. Not a long one. The rider lifted a tool more like a shock baton than a weapon, and Jonas staggered back, hitting the wall. He did not scream. He tried to stand again, face tight with pain, refusing to give up. Lena reached for the emergency flare on her belt, but the second rider grabbed her wrist and twisted it away. The flare fell to the floor. Myra watched from her hiding place, eyes wide, mouth open, but no sound came out. Everything moved too fast and too slow at the same time. Jonas tried to push the rider away again, using his body as a shield. The rider struck him a second time. Jonas fell, breath knocked out. He reached toward Myra's hiding place without looking, like a father trying to touch his child with hope alone. Jonas, Lena cried. The rider turned his helmet toward Myra's hiding place as if he could sense the fear there. Myra froze so hard she felt like stone. Lena stepped in front of that gaze. She's just a kid, she said. Please leave her. The rider did not answer. He moved toward the trailer map display, then pointed to a root file. He tapped something. A small light blinked, like he was searching, not stealing, like he wanted information. Lena understood. We don't know anything, she said. We're just moving towns. The rider grabbed the data pad anyway. Outside, more skimmers moved around the convoy, checking the other rigs. Myra heard distant shouting from the hired drivers, then silence again. The wind covered everything like a blanket. Jonas tried to stand once more. His hands shook, but his eyes stayed sharp. He looked at Myra's hiding spot and gave a small nod, as if telling her, stay hidden, stay alive. Then he swayed and collapsed again. Lena dropped to her knees beside him. No, she whispered. Please. The riders left the cabin with the pad. The door hissed shut again, but the lock light stayed red, like a cage. Myra crawled out slowly. Her legs felt weak, as if they belonged to someone else. She reached for her father's hand. It was warm, but his grip was faint. Jonas's lips moved. His voice was rough, barely there. Myra, listen. She leaned close. Go when it's quiet, he murmured. Follow the beacons, Dust Haven. Lena's eyes shone with tears, but she forced her voice steady. We'll go together, she said, though fear tried to break her words. Jonas looked at her with the kind of sadness that has no room for complaints. I'm sorry, he whispered. Myra shook her head hard. No, she tried to say, but the word did not come out. Her throat tightened. Her chest tightened. It felt like her voice had fallen into a deep hole where she could not reach it. Lena held Myra close. Breathe, baby, she said. Just breathe. Outside, the skimmers roared away. Their engines were quiet, but Myra still felt the ground shake as they vanished into the storm. The convoy sat broken in the desert. The power returned in weak bursts. The screens blinked. The beacons continued their steady, uncaring pulse. Hours passed, or maybe only minutes. Time did not behave normally when fear lived in the air. When the night finally came, the sky filled with cold stars. The caravan's lights did not return. Only the beacons, far away, blinked like distant eyes. Lena made a decision. She packed a small survival bag, water pouch, heat blanket, a flare that still worked, and a locator chip that might send a signal if it found a satellite. She took Myra's hand and squeezed it. We're going to walk, she said. We're going to keep moving. Myra stared at her mother's lips. She wanted to ask where her father would be. She wanted to ask why the riders came. She wanted to scream that it was not fair, but her mouth did nothing. Only her eyes spoke, full of shock and questions. They walked along the beacon line, step by step, through the red dust. The wind pushed against them. Lena kept glancing behind like she expected the darkness to chase them. Myra's tin star swung from her fingers. It felt heavier now, like it carried the weight of everything she could not say. Far ahead, a faint glow marked a settlement, Dust Haven. But between them and that light, the desert stretched wide. And somewhere out there, unseen, silent, patient, someone was still watching the route. Part 1 ends with Myra and Lena walking toward Dust Haven, Myra unable to speak, while the unknown riders escape with stolen data, hinting there is a bigger secret behind the attack. The sun rose slowly over the red desert, turning the sky from dark blue to pale gold. The wind had calmed during the night, but the silence felt heavy, as if the planet itself was holding its breath. Myra and her mother Lena walked along the old beacon path. Their steps were slow, dust covered their boots and clothes. Lena's face looked tired, but she kept moving because stopping meant danger. Myra did not speak. She had not spoken since the attack. She held her small tin star tightly, her eyes fixed on the ground as if afraid to look anywhere else. Sometimes she glanced back, like she expected her father to follow them, but the desert behind them stayed empty. After many hours, they finally saw the outer towers of Dust Haven. The settlement stood inside a ring of metal walls made from old mining equipment and ship parts. Towers with blinking lights watched the horizon. Solar panels stretched like dark mirrors across the sand. Smoke rose from a few chimneys where machines still worked. Dust Haven was not beautiful, but it meant safety. At the gate, 2 guards watched the approaching figures through long scanners. They wore frontier coats and energy rifles slung across their shoulders. One guard raised a hand. "Identify yourselves." Lena stopped, lifting her hands slowly. "Travelers." "Caravan attacked near the South Beacon line. We need help." The guards exchanged a look. One of them opened the gate slightly and stepped forward. He noticed Lena's torn sleeve and Myra's silent stare. "Come inside," he said more gently. Inside the walls, Dust Haven felt alive compared to the empty desert. Cargo bots rolled along metal tracks. People moved between buildings made from stacked containers and old ship hulls. A water tower stood at the center like a symbol of hope. But the town also looked tired. Paint peeled from walls. Some windows were broken and covered with cloth. Life here was hard. A woman named Mara, the town leader, met them at a small clinic. She had gray hair tied back and eyes that had seen many storms. "You're safe now," Mara said quietly. Lena tried to answer, but her voice shook. She explained what happened to their caravan, how the riders attacked without warning, how Jonas had been hurt badly. Saying it out loud made the memory feel more real, and tears finally fell from her eyes. Myra stood beside her silently, staring at the floor. The clinic medic examined them. Lena had small injuries, but nothing serious. Myra had no physical wounds, but the medic noticed something else. "She's in shock," the medic whispered to Myra. "Deep trauma." Myra knelt in front of Myra. "Hello," she said softly. "You're safe here." Myra looked at her but did not respond. "Can you tell me your name?" Myra asked. Silence. Myra's lips moved slightly, but no sound came out. Lena placed a hand on her daughter's shoulder. "Her name is Myra," she said. She hasn't spoken since yesterday." Myra nodded slowly. "Sometimes the heart protects itself by closing doors," she said gently. "We will give her time." They were given a small room near the clinic. It had 2 beds, a window facing the main street, and a heater that hummed softly. For the first time since the attack, Lena allowed herself to sit down. Myra stood near the window and watched the people outside. Children ran past chasing a small drone toy. A group of miners walked by carrying tools, their boots heavy with dust. Life continued here, even with danger close by, but she felt separate from it, like she was watching from behind invisible glass. Later that day, Myra returned with food and water. She also brought news. "We sent a rescue team toward your caravan," she said carefully. "The storm slowed them. We don't know what they will find yet." Lena nodded, understanding what that meant. Hope and fear lived side by side in her chest. That evening, Myra wandered outside while her mother slept. The town lights flickered on as the sky darkened. Soft music played from somewhere far away. Voices filled the air, but none of them reached her heart. She walked past the central square, past the trading stalls, and toward the edge of town where the mining rigs stood like tall metal skeletons against the horizon. One rig stood apart from the others. It was old but still active. A single light glowed near its base. Machines hummed quietly, and a long drill arm pointed toward the ground like a finger searching for secrets. A man worked there alone. He wore a long coat covered with dust and a wide hat that hid most of his face. His movements were slow and careful as he repaired a broken panel. This was Hale. He heard the soft sound of footsteps and turned slightly. When he saw the small girl standing near the fence, he frowned. "You shouldn't be out here," he said in a calm voice. Myra did not move. Hale noticed her eyes first. They looked older than her age, filled with something heavy. He stepped closer but kept a respectful distance. "Lost?" he asked. She shook her head slightly. He waited for her to speak. She didn't. After a moment, Hale sighed. "All right," he said. "You can stay a minute, just don't touch anything." He returned to his work, but he felt her watching him. It felt strange. He was used to being alone. Most people in Dust Haven avoided him because he kept to himself. After finishing the repair, he sat down on a metal crate to rest. Without thinking, he pulled out a small metal carving tool and began shaping a piece of scrap into a simple toy figure, a habit he had developed to keep his hands busy during quiet hours. Myra watched closely. He held up the small carving. "See, nothing special." She stepped closer, her eyes showing curiosity for the first time. Hale noticed something change in her expression, not happiness but interest. "You don't talk much, huh?" he said gently. Silence. He nodded slowly. "That's all right, I don't either." They sat together in quiet for several minutes, watching the red sunset. For the first time since the attack, Myra felt a small sense of calm. Later, a search drone arrived near the rig, its light scanning the area. It stopped briefly, hovering above them. Hale frowned at it. "Town surveillance," he muttered, though something about it felt different. The drone flew away toward the desert. Hale didn't know that it had recorded Myra's face. When Mara later asked if anyone had seen the new child, Hale mentioned the quiet girl at his rig. Mara nodded thoughtfully. "She's been through something terrible," she said. "Maybe she needs space." Hale shrugged. "Kids should be with their families, not old miners." But that night, as he worked under the stars, he noticed small footprints in the dust near his tools, proof she had stayed longer than he realized. Back in the room, Lena woke and found Myra asleep for the first time without crying. Days passed. Myra returned to the mining rig again and again. She never spoke, but she followed Hale's movements with careful attention. He began leaving small tasks for her, like handing him tools or pressing buttons on safe panels. He never forced conversation. He simply existed beside her. And slowly, without either of them noticing, a silent bond began to grow. But beyond the walls of Dust Haven, engines moved through the desert again. The same black skimmers that attacked the caravan watched from far away. And now they knew the silent girl had survived. Dust Haven woke slowly each morning, but on this day something felt different. The sky looked normal. The red sun rose over the desert like always. Workers walked toward the mines, traders opened their stalls, and children ran between buildings. Yet a quiet tension hung in the air like a warning nobody could explain. Mara, the town leader, stood near the watchtower with a pair of scanning binoculars. The night guards had reported strange signals beyond the South Ridge. Not storms, not traders, something else. "Keep the gates ready," she told the guards. "No panic, just stay alert." Meanwhile, Myra sat outside Hale's mining rig, watching him repair a small drilling drone. She held a wrench carefully, waiting for him to ask for it. Hale noticed her patience and gave a small nod. "Hand me that," he said gently. She passed the tool silently. He worked without rushing, explaining things even though she did not speak. "Machines are like people," he said quietly. "If you push them too hard, they break. If you listen to them, they last longer." Myra listened closely. She liked the way he spoke, not loud, not demanding, just calm. She still hadn't said a single word since the attack. Sometimes she opened her mouth as if trying, but nothing came out. Hale never pressured her. He simply allowed silence to exist between them. Later that day, Mara approached the rig. "Hale," she called. He wiped his hands on a cloth and turned. "What's wrong?" "Scanners picked up unknown movement outside the perimeter," Mara said. "Fast vehicles, same direction as the caravan attack." Hale's expression hardened. "You think they're coming here?" "I don't know," she replied honestly. "But I don't like coincidences." Myra watched them carefully. Even without understanding every word, she felt the tension. Mara looked at her gently. "We're going to keep everyone safe," she said softly. Myra lowered her gaze. As evening approached, Dust Haven prepared quietly. Gates were reinforced. Patrol drones flew higher than usual. The town didn't want to show fear, but everyone sensed danger. Hale stayed near his rig, pretending to focus on repairs, but his eyes often scanned the horizon. Myra sat beside him, drawing shapes in the dust with a small stick. She drew a vehicle, then another. Then dark shapes surrounding a smaller one. Hale noticed. His chest tightened. "Those were the riders?" he asked carefully. She nodded slowly. He sat beside her. "You remember everything, don't you?" Her eyes filled with emotion, but she stayed silent. Hale felt anger rising, not at her, but at whoever caused that pain. Before he could speak again, an alarm sounded from the watchtower. A long, sharp tone that cut through the town like lightning. People froze. Myra's voice came through the speakers. "Unknown vehicles approaching from the south. All civilians move inside. Defense teams to your positions." Dust Haven changed instantly. Traders closed stalls. Children were rushed into buildings, doors locked. Defense turrets turned toward the desert. Hale stood up slowly. "Stay here," he told Myra. She shook her head quickly. He hesitated. He didn't want her near danger, but he also saw fear in her eyes at the idea of being left alone. "All right," he said quietly. "Stay close." They moved toward the central square where several defenders gathered. Most were miners or former frontier riders, people used to surviving with limited resources. Far beyond the walls, dust clouds appeared. Black shapes emerged from the horizon, the same skimmers. Myra's body stiffened. Her breathing became fast and shallow. Hale noticed immediately. He crouched beside her. "Hey," he said gently. "Look at me, not them." She tried, but memories rushed back, flashes of her father falling, her mother crying, the sound of engines. The skimmers stopped just outside weapon range. One vehicle moved forward alone. A voice came through the external speakers. "We are searching for stolen property," the voice said calmly. "Return the data and no harm will come to this settlement." Myra stepped forward onto the wall platform. "You attacked a civilian caravan," she replied firmly. "You are not welcome here." Silence followed, then the voice answered, colder now. "You are protecting something that belongs to us." Hale glanced at Myra, the data pad. Her parents, something deeper was happening. Suddenly, a small drone rose from one of the skimmers and projected a hologram, a blurry image of Myra. "We believe this child has information," the voice continued. Myra's heart pounded. She stepped back instinctively. Hale moved slightly in front of her without thinking. "She's just a kid," he muttered. Myra crossed her arms. "You have no authority here. Leave." The tension stretched like a rope ready to snap. For a moment, nothing happened. Then one of the skimmers moved forward aggressively. The defense turrets powered up with a loud hum. The air felt electric. Hale's mind raced. He knew how these situations usually ended: violence, loss, regret. He looked down at Myra. She was shaking. Without thinking, he placed a hand gently on her shoulder. "You're safe," he said quietly. "I won't let anything happen." Her eyes lifted toward him. Something in his voice reached her, a promise stronger than fear. The skimmer engines roared louder, but before any attack began, another signal interrupted the moment. A distant explosion echoed from behind the approaching vehicles, far in the desert. All eyes turned. A second group of riders appeared from another direction, firing warning shots toward the black skimmers. The mysterious attackers suddenly retreated, pulling back into the dust. Within seconds, they vanished. Silence fell again. Nobody understood what just happened. Mara lowered her weapon slowly. "What was that?" Hale didn't answer. His attention stayed on Myra. Her breathing slowly calmed, but tears filled her eyes. She grabbed his sleeve tightly, as if afraid he might disappear. He gently covered her hand with his own. "It's over," he said softly, but deep inside he knew it was. Someone wanted the girl badly enough to threaten an entire town, and someone else had interfered. That meant a bigger story was unfolding, one connected to her parents and the data they carried. That night, as Dust Haven returned to uneasy quiet, Hale sat outside his rig with Myra beside him. The stars filled the sky again. She opened her mouth slightly. A small sound escaped, barely a whisper, not a full word, but the first step toward finding her voice again. Hale pretended not to notice immediately, giving her space. Inside, he felt something shift. Maybe she wasn't completely lost in silence after all. And somewhere beyond the horizon, unseen eyes continued watching Dust Haven, waiting for the next move. The night after the skimmer attack felt quiet but not peaceful. Dust Haven returned to normal routines, yet everyone knew danger had not disappeared. Guards doubled their patrols. Drones watched the horizon without rest. The red desert stretched endlessly beyond the walls, hiding unknown enemies. Hale sat outside his mining rig, staring at the stars. Myra sat beside him. She held the small metal carving he had made for her, a simple figure shaped like a tiny rider. Her fingers moved slowly across its surface as if trying to understand every line. Neither of them spoke, but the silence between them felt different now. It was no longer heavy with fear. It felt calmer, like the quiet before a sunrise. Hale glanced at her. "You did good today," he said gently. "You stayed strong." Myra looked at him, her eyes soft but thoughtful. He noticed her breathing slow and steady. She opened her mouth slightly like she wanted to speak, but then stopped again. He nodded. "It's all right," he said. "No rush." The next morning, Mara called Hale to the main building. "We need to talk," she said. Inside, a holographic map hovered above the table. Red dots marked recent skimmer sightings. "They're searching for something," Mara explained, "and I think it's connected to the girl." Hale crossed his arms. "She's just a child." "Maybe," Mara said carefully, "but they risked exposure attacking a settlement. That means whatever they want is important." She showed him recovered data from the caravan wreckage. "The caravan carried a hidden file," she said. "Encrypted. We believe her parents were transporting evidence, illegal mining operations run by off-world corporations." Hale frowned. "So they attacked to silence witnesses." Mara nodded. "Exactly." Hale's thoughts turned heavy. The girl beside him outside, the quiet child watching machines, was now the center of something much bigger. "What do you want me to do?" he asked. "Protect her," Mara replied simply. "She trusts you." Hale didn't answer right away. Trust was a heavy word. He had avoided responsibility for years, believing he only brought bad luck to people he cared about. But when he returned to the rig and saw Myra waiting near the fence, something inside him changed. She smiled slightly when she saw him. A small smile, but real. Days passed quietly. Myra helped him with small tasks. She learned to tighten bolts, check fuel lines, and operate simple scanners. Hale spoke often, telling stories about mining routes and old frontier legends. He didn't expect answers, but he wanted her to feel included. Slowly, her eyes began to shine again. One evening, a storm gathered quickly. Red clouds rolled across the sky. Lightning flashed far away. The wind howled through the metal towers. Storm alarms sounded across Dust Haven. "Everyone inside!" guards shouted. Hale secured his equipment, but a warning flashed on his console. External sensors detected movement approaching fast. The skimmers. They had returned. This time, they did not stop at the border. Explosions struck near the outer walls, sending dust into the air. Defense turrets fired back, bright beams cutting through the storm. Mara's voice echoed through the speakers. "All defenders to positions." Hale grabbed his coat. "Myra, stay inside," he said firmly, but she shook her head, fear filling her eyes. "I'll come back," he promised softly. She hesitated, then slowly stepped into the rig as instructed. Outside, chaos filled the town. People ran between buildings. Energy blasts lit the sky. The attackers moved fast, trying to reach the central square. Hale joined a small defense group, using a mining vehicle as cover while returning fire. The storm made visibility poor. Wind screamed across the settlement like an angry spirit. Suddenly, an explosion hit near the mining rig. Hale's heart dropped. "Myra," he shouted, running back through flying dust. The rig's side wall had collapsed slightly. Smoke filled the air. He rushed inside. Myra stood near the back, unharmed but terrified. She looked at him like she had been waiting forever. "I'm here," he said quickly, kneeling beside her. Another blast shook the ground. The attackers were getting closer. "We need to move," he said. He took her hand, guiding her toward a hidden escape tunnel used by miners during emergencies. But before they reached it, two black-armored figures appeared at the doorway, the same riders. One raised a weapon, aiming directly at them. Hale stepped forward instinctively, shielding Myra behind him. "Leave her alone," he said, voice steady despite fear. The rider tilted his head. "She carries what we need." Hale didn't move. "Over my dead body," he said quietly. The rider stepped closer. Time felt slow. Myra watched everything, the danger, Hale's bravery, the way he refused to step aside. Memories crashed through her mind, her father standing the same way, protecting her, her mother's voice telling her to be strong. Fear rose inside her like a wave, her chest tightened, her throat burned, and suddenly, "Stop!" the word burst from her like a broken dam. The room froze, even Hale turned slowly, eyes wide. Myra stood trembling, tears streaming down her face. "Stop!" she whispered again, her voice small but real. It was the first word she had spoken since the attack. The riders hesitated, surprised by the sudden sound. Hale felt emotion hit him like a storm. "She spoke," he whispered. The distraction gave defenders enough time to arrive. Mara and 2 guards rushed in, forcing the attackers to retreat. Moments later, the danger passed. The skimmers pulled away again, chased by defense fire. Silence returned slowly. Myra collapsed into Hale's arms, crying openly now, not silent tears, but loud, real sobs. He held her gently. "You did it," he said softly. "You found your voice." She looked up at him. "Hale," she said, testing the word, his name. He smiled, a rare, warm smile that changed his whole face. After the attack, Dust Haven worked together to rebuild damaged areas. News spread quickly that the silent girl had spoken again. Myra continued to speak slowly over the following days. Each word came carefully, like a fragile treasure. She told small pieces of her memories, how her parents had been afraid before the attack, how they carried hidden data meant to expose dangerous mining operations. The truth reached other settlements, bringing hope that justice might come. Hale found himself changing too. The lonely miner who once avoided people now walked through town with purpose. He laughed more. He listened more. One evening, as the sun set over the red desert, Hale and Myra sat together outside the rig. "Are you leaving?" she asked quietly. He thought for a moment. "No," he said finally. "Not anymore," she smiled. The wind carried dust across the horizon, but this time it felt peaceful. 2 lonely souls who had lost everything had found something new, a family built not by blood, but by trust. And under the endless frontier sky, their story began again.